So as Katie said, my name is Joanne Kwasniewski. I'm the Plant Health Officer for SARM Division 2, and I'm going to kick off this Fieldwork 101 session with an app that you can use in the field to track prohibited and noxious weeds within your RM, First Nation band, or city. So I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on the iMap invasives database, how to sign up and log an observation on your mobile device. If you're already signed up for iMap and you have the app, you can follow along on your device, or you can sit back and watch. A lot of the information that I'm using today is courtesy of Beryl Waite with the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center, and she's your biggest resource when it comes to iMap, and I'll have her contact information at the end of this presentation. So what exactly is iMap invasives? It's an online map-based tracking tool and database for invasive species, and it can be used by land managers, First Nation bands, weed inspectors, RMs, researchers, citizens, basically anyone. And it's designed to share and manage invasive species information. So why do we want to use iMap invasives? First of all, it's free for anyone to use, and anyone can sign up for an account. The mobile app, which is what we're going to talk about today, allows you to take observations of invasive species in the field and upload them to the online database. You can also set up email alerts, which facilitate early detection and rapid response in your area. So you can find species and log them, and so that everyone who lives in that area knows that that species is now present and they can keep an eye out for it. And the most important reason to use iMap is to store and share data about invasive species across the province. So this data includes maps where species are located. You can also track your treatment efforts and how effective those treatments were. And you can also store data about areas searched for invasive species. So if you have not already signed up for iMap, it's really simple. You just go to imapinvasives.org and you click the login button at the top right-hand corner. And then you'll be taken to the sign up page, and you just have to enter your name, your email, and you have to create a password. And then you have to select your jurisdiction. So for us in Saskatchewan, you select Saskatchewan, and then you click join. So you should get a confirmation email after you sign up saying that you now have an iMaps account. And after that, you can get the app. And so you can get the mobile app from the Google Play Store or Apple Store, depending on what kind of device you have. And when you first open the mobile app, you have to set your preferences. So don't overthink this too much. You can always go back and change your preferences later if you decide you like to set things up differently. But first of all, you need to select your jurisdiction again. So that's Saskatchewan. And then you scroll down and you have to enter your email address that you used to sign up for iMaps. And then you also have to enter the password that you created. The next thing you need to do is retrieve your iMap lists. So just below where you signed in, you'll hit this green button, retrieve iMap lists, and you should get a prompt saying that your data was retrieved successfully. And you press OK. And then you're going to select how you want species names displayed in the app. So if you want to use common names, you select common, or if you want to use scientific or Latin names, you select that. And you can also create custom species lists if you want. So this would be, if you don't want to see all the Saskatchewan species that are in iMaps, you can create your own specific list that you have to scroll through. And then you can select your picture quality. The default is 50%, and that's what I've always used, but you can change it depending on what you like. And you can also elect to save photos taken in the app to your photo library, and that's optional. If you don't want those photos to save, you can just unclick the box. And then you select your map preference. So road or satellite. I like working with satellite because there's more landmarks, but it all depends on what you want to use. Default map zoom is, the default is 12, and I've always left it there because when you're taking an observation, you can always zoom in or out with the app. And then you can choose your measurement system. So imperial or metric. I like working in metric, so that's what I chose. And then if your iMap account is associated with any projects, you can select a default project. But if you don't have any projects, that's fine. You can just leave that blank. And the same thing for organization. So if you have any organizations associated with your iMap account, you can select a default one, but you also don't need an organization. You can turn your welcome instructions on or off. I always leave them on, and then you save. And so now we've set our preferences. This is the home screen of the app, and this is the welcome screen that shows you where all the different places in the app are, where you can add an observation, where the menu is. And to continue on, you just tap the screen. And now we're going to create an observation within the app. So all you have to do is, if you're out in the field, say we just came across a patch of leafy spurge, you're going to open the app and go to Add Observation in the top right-hand corner. The first time you open the app, you might need to give it access to your location while you're using the app. And this is used to determine where you're standing when you're taking that observation. So you just hit allow. And then the first thing you do when you're creating an observation is take a photo. You can take the photo in the app or use one from your library. You only get one photo per observation, so you want to make sure it's a good photo where identifying features of the plant are visible. And if you're finding that your observations are taking a long time to upload, you can reduce your camera resolution to make those photos smaller. So since we found leafy spurge, we're going to select leafy spurge from the list of species. And then you're going to choose, since the species is present, we're going to say species detected. If it wasn't there, we would say species not detected. And the date automatically goes to the date that you create the observation, but you can change that if you need to. And then you can change your map between satellite and road, depending on what you want to use. And if you keep that GPS box checked, the app will automatically pick up your location. So this is where we found the spurge. So the device will automatically pick up your location if you have that GPS box checked. If it's unchecked, you can actually manually place your points. So in this one, I unchecked the GPS box and manually placed my point, and it picks up my location. And you're always going to want to double check that your location is accurate. If the map happens to not show up, it probably means you're not connected to the internet. And that's fine. If your GPS is enabled, the coordinates should still reflect your location. And something else you can do is, if you're going to be going somewhere where you know there's not very good service, when you're still at home connected to the internet, you can open your observation early and zoom in on the map where you plan to go, and then the map is preloaded when you're in the field. Or again, you can manually place the point by unchecking the GPS box and then holding your finger on the point for 2 seconds to move to your desired location. And so after you've set your location, you can pick a project and an organization if you want them to be associated with a specific project or organization. But again, that's optional. You can enter the time that you searched the area as well. So this was a really small patch, so it took 5 minutes max. And then you have to select the approximate size of the patch. So this was a small patch, so I just picked up to 10 square meters, but there's options up to 1 hectare or more than 1 hectare. If you want a more precise area, you can enter it into the comment box below. And so next, we're going to select the distribution of the invasive. So there's a few different options for this as well. If it's just a single plant, you can put trace. If it's sparse, you just put down scattered plants or dense or monoculture, or if it's along a roadside, you can say it's linearly scattered. Next, you can enter any additional information in the comment box if it's pertinent to the observation. And when you're satisfied, you just hit save. So now that we've created our observation, we need to upload it to the database online. And this does require Wi-Fi or data, and it's generally recommended to wait until you're connected to Wi-Fi, but I have uploaded it using data without any issues before. If you happen to complete your observation and it comes out red, it means it's incomplete. So that means, so you can see in this one it says species none selected, so that means that I did not select a species. So before I upload this one, I'll need to hit that little pencil icon and go in and edit it. But since my leafy spurge observation came out yellow, which means complete, I can select it. And then I'm gonna move to the left-hand corner of the screen and select the menu button. And then I'm going to select Upload Selected. It's gonna ask if you're sure you wanna upload, you press OK. And then we've just uploaded our first observation. So it's really quite simple and it gets faster and easier the more you do it. Beyond the mobile app, there's a lot of features on the iMap Invasives website, like the online map. So this is a screenshot of the Saskatchewan map, and you can see all these observations across the province. When you zoom in on all those orange dots, you'll see individual records. So it's a really cool place to click around and see where things have been found throughout the province. And so that's something you can use to view your own observations and others' observations. Another feature is that you can set up email alerts for when new observations are uploaded to the database in a specific area. So for example, you could set it for whenever there's an observation in your RM, you could get an email alert so that you're aware of what's being found within your area. There's a pretty comprehensive PDF on the iMap Invasives website that shows you exactly how to do this. And if you ever run into any trouble, there's a lot of help and resources on the iMap site that has a user manual, frequently asked questions, and even YouTube tutorials. So that's a great resource for if you ever have issues or questions. Another thing that you can use is there's actually going to be a webinar next week, Thursday, February 18th at noon, where you can submit a question and then you can have all your questions answered about iMaps in this live Q&A. So it's open to anyone with an iMap account or anyone with an interest in learning more. And you can register at that link below and we can send out that link after the webinar as well. And your #1 support for iMap Invasives is Vera Waite. And she's the invasive species coordinator at the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center. And her contact information is below. Vera runs the iMap Invasives project for Saskatchewan, and so she knows the database better than anyone, and she can answer basically any question you have. And you can also contact any of your plant health officers for issues as well. And that's it. Thanks for your attention, and I hope that this inspires you to give iMaps a try for this summer.
Awesome, thanks, Joanne. Okay, so we are going to move on to my part of the presentation. We are going to talk about field skills and tools for weed inspectors. Why won't it advance? There we go. Okay.
Actually, Katie, there's a couple of questions for Joanne.
Oh, okay. We can go through those now. Okay, Joanne, Scott is asking, when we're working as a weed inspector, should we use SARM as the association or not?
Your RM can actually set themselves up as their own organization if they want. So it's kind of up to you. I don't know if Clark has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would suggest that only people that are working for SARM directly should have SARM as their organization. And anybody that's working for an RM should have that RM as the organization. And any anybody working for any other agency. So I know Scott does a little bit of work for the Ministry of Highways as well. That should be the organization in that case. So it's going to depend on who you're quote unquote working for at the time. Oh no, I also added a note into the chat regarding that meeting on iMap invasives next week. And that meeting is less about how to use the app and more about why the platform is what it is and why it looks like it does, and so some of the background behind the app. Yes, Glenda has a good point. If the RM sets themselves up as an organization, then they get a high level of authority on that app. And so anybody that enters a location within the RM, if they have that authority, they can see that location and they get reports via email when they're set up that way. So that's the other advantage to reporting it as the RM.
And it's pretty much instant. I've done a few like that, and when I've entered in an observation, it appears in my email within 10 minutes. So it's nice to have that feature. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have, so I'll move on with my presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit first about record keeping. Why do you need to keep records? Record keeping isn't underutilized, but it's a very important skill necessary to weed inspectors. We need to keep a really good record of all that we do for all these reasons. The first one is annual reports, which are required under the Weed Control Act. It shows council that you're doing your job. It shows them that you've been out doing your inspections, just keeping track of everything. It shows them that you're being professional and responsible. So it's good to have that. Written records, they can come in really handy if a matter ever goes to court. So if there's ever any dispute about anything, you've got your records finished, they are accurate, and they are good to go. So another thing is that memory isn't always great. I know I have a hard time remembering what happened last week, never mind 4 or 5 months ago. So it's always good to have those things written down. So how do you keep records? It can be so simple as just a notebook and a pen. Another good thing we have around us all the time is cell phones. So you can either type in notes, you can use the app for doing that. You can write up an email and send it to yourself so you have it. It's always dated if it's on your cell phone and saved, so you never have to worry about putting the wrong date on it or forgetting to put a date on it. So that's pretty handy. I get a lot of questions about what do you need to record, and I've kind of worked it out into the 5 W's. So you want to write down who you're talking with or who the situation concerns. So you talk, say if you get a complaint or something like that, you want to describe the situation. If you're just doing a routine inspection, just write down where you're going, what you're doing that day. What issue are you talking about in your notes? If you're looking at a patch of weeds, you want to note the density, the stage of growth. You want to definitely write down what time you're out there, what date you're out there. You want to go into where you are, write down your location. If you have a GPS or a land location, you definitely want to include that. And always make sure you put down why you're there. So for example, last summer I got called out to do a complaint on a dandelion population. And under the Weed Control Act, we still need to investigate complaints on nuisance weeds. So I went out there and I had my little notebook with me. And this is exactly how I did it. I wrote down who complained against who, the weed that I was going to investigate, The density, so on that particular field, the dandelions covered probably 80% of the field. They were at a medium density, sometimes high density, and they were in varying stages of growth. So you definitely just want to write down all of that stuff. I wrote down the date and the land location, any other steps you take. So if you go out to talk to the person that's being complained against, you want to describe that interaction and what you discussed and what their kind of side of the story was, that kind of thing. And you definitely want to take pictures. They are very handy to have. If you take pictures with your cell phone, they're always date stamped, so you know what date and what time it was taken, and it's easy to refer to later on. This all has to do with due diligence. So due diligence is extremely important. In other words, it means that you are doing all you can to prevent trouble down the road. So always follow through, always complete all the work necessary, and make sure you have covered all the bases. So that's all about records. It was kind of a short and sweet little description, but it's always good to have those basic things down. Lots of people don't think about them, but they're very important. Another thing that we think is very important is taking photos of plants for ID and documentation. We get a lot of pictures in season from weed inspectors, producers, and sometimes it's easy to tell what's going on in the picture, and sometimes you definitely need more information or a better picture. So here's a few tips on how to do that. Oops. So tip number one, we always need to use a good background. So a lot of times when you're out on the field, you don't have beautiful backgrounds to use, so you just use what you've got. Hood of your truck, the tailgate of your truck. You can even take it to the road, use a piece of plywood or cardboard that you have in the back. Something that works really well is dark clothing, like a jacket or even your jeans. It should contrast with the plant that you're looking at and eliminate any other distractions, so you can tell exactly what you're looking at. Number two is use your camera well. You want to clean the lens, make sure it's not dirty or smudged. It'll be really difficult to take a clear photo if your lens is dirty. You want to check your camera settings and features. Most smartphone cameras, they'll, if you tap on the image you want to focus on, it'll actually sharpen the image and make it a lot easier to get a good picture. Always be mindful of the angle of the sun and any shadows present. If you've got a big old shadow right where you're supposed to be taking the picture of, it's really hard to get a good clear picture. So in this photo, you can see a little bit of shadow here, but I've made sure to get the image of the leaf I wanted to take a picture of in clear sunshine. You always want to make sure that your subject is obvious. Make sure that whoever's looking at that picture to help you identify it knows exactly what you're talking about and exactly what weed you're trying to identify. Out of focus pictures are almost impossible to identify. It makes it so hard to see those key features of the plants. Here's a good example. The one on the right is a good example of focus, or sorry, the one on the left actually. It's clear and sharp. You can see the leaf shape, the jagged leaf margins, the size of the leaf, the color of the leaf. It's all very important for identification. The one on the right is really blurry. It's out of focus. The key features of the plant are not easy to identify. You can't see the leaf shape all that well. You can't see if it's got hairs on it. The stem is even really hard to look at. And yeah, it's a tough one to identify. Number three, we want to pay attention to details. So plants are identified by key features. You're looking at the leaf shape, the leaf margins, the stem shape, color, flowers, texture, all that stuff. So taking good close-up photos of these features is so important for accurate identification. We want to photograph close up, so get those key features close up so the person that you're sending it to can help you look at it. And then you want to take a further away picture of the whole plant. And if it's necessary, you want to try and capture the whole infestation. So if it's a patch of leafy spurge or a patch of dandelions or something like that that you have to identify or document, it's important to get a good picture of that. So take it from a few angles and always be mindful of just background and sun angles and stuff like that. Size references can often be helpful when we're identifying weeds. You want to use a standard size item like a tape measure or a pop can, a loonie. It's good to have a tape measure in your field kit. We'll go over that right away. So you can figure out what size weeds are and make sure that you don't lose your plant in the background. We're going to talk about that. So this is a good example of a plant that was lost in the background. In this picture, you can see it, but you can't really make out any of those key features. You can see the flower all right, but you can't really see the rest of the plant at all. So the best thing in this situation to do is either remove the plant and take it to your vehicle and use one of the backgrounds that we mentioned earlier, or you can take, say, a piece of cardboard or something and place it behind the plant just to differentiate it from all those other plants in the background. Just a note, if you do remove the plant, make sure that you dispose of it properly to avoid spreading it to other areas. So don't pull it and then put it in the back of your truck and forget about it for a week and then have it blow out later on the highway somewhere else. That's a good way to spread invasive weeds. So if you're going to pull it, make sure that you either leave it where it is or dispose of it in a garbage bag, double bag it if you need to, and burn it if you can, or just make sure it's properly disposed of. A few more things to avoid. These ones are another example of plants kind of lost in the background. These are really hard to identify. You can kind of take a guess at some of them, but to get a really good, accurate identification on these, or even for documentation purposes, it's really hard to see what's going on, especially back here, or, there's a lot of other plants that are kind of drowning out what you really want to get identified. These are some good examples. These come to us from Lynn Roselle in Division 4. It shows how a good background is essential to good plant photos. You can see here she put her jacket behind this plant, and you can see the difference between a good background and no background. And it makes it so much easier to see every little feature of these plants. This one is really good as well. You can see it's so sharp and clear. You can really see what's going on here. Another good thing about these pictures is that Lynn was able to use her camera features to write down the name of the plant for easy reference. So if you do get a plant identified, you can always use your settings in your camera or in your photo gallery to go back and edit the photo. I think she might have used Snapchat or something for this, but in your phone, like in your camera settings, you can also do this as well. So the next thing we're going to go over is biosecurity and field supplies. Always good to have a field kit available for use when you're out on the road. So first we're going to go over biosecurity. In other words, biosecurity is preventing the spread of weed seeds or plant disease from one area to another. So for example, if you happen to be walking in a cropped field, it's important to use biosecurity measures to prevent spreading soil-borne diseases such as clubroot in canola or Aphanomyces in pulse crops. Big thing for weed inspectors is preventing weed seeds from moving from one area to the other. Say if you're a weed inspector in 1 RM and you finish for the day and you come home, to 3 or 4 RMs down the road, you don't want to spread something like leafy spurge. If you get the seeds in your shoelaces, you don't want to spread that where you live or elsewhere. So Very important to always make sure you clean off everything. So some tips when it comes to biosecurity: don't drive into fields and pastures. Vehicles are a lot harder to clean off than shoes and pants. So just avoid it if at all possible. If you're from a different area, definitely avoid it. Say if you need to go and inspect a community pasture or something like that, try and use their equipment. So if they have a quad that you can use or a truck that you can use that's already been exposed in the area and isn't going to leave the area, that's a smart thing to do. If you are inspecting or investigating, you want to make sure that you check for weed seeds and plant parts and soil on your equipment. Look on your shoelaces, inside your boots, on your pant hems. Check for soil residue on your clippers, your trowel. Yeah, just anywhere that might have touched plants or brushed by plants, and clean them off. So that's why we like using boot covers so much, is because they're easy to put on and off, and they save you a lot of time later on. All this stuff is not mandatory, but we really encourage it. It's a good measure to just protect yourself and protect everyone, I guess. It's a smart thing to get used to doing, just because I think in the long run we're going to have to be doing a lot more of this as time goes on. It's pretty important, especially when you're concerning field crops. So make sure you want to collect your used boot covers and gloves in garbage bags and dispose of them properly. So here's just a good list of a good biosecurity and field kit. Always make sure that you travel with a copy of your Weed Control Act and your appointment card and letter. So have your binder with all of your paperwork and everything in it. Just keep it in your vehicle if you can, and then it's always ready in case you stumble across something if you're driving by, or if you get called out to do an investigation or an inspection. Just keep a box of gloves. They're handy to have, so you don't have to wash your hands if you get, like, say, plant sap or something on them that could potentially burn your hands. If you're going through something like burdock that might want to hang on to you, gloves kind of tend to keep that off a little bit better. And then you don't have to worry about anything after that. So good things to have if you are walking through cropped field is a bleach solution. We'll go over that right away. It's a good way to kill any soil-borne particles that might be clinging to you. What else? Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about weed ID books right away. Just handy things to have with you. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So just one last word on the Weed Control Act. It is the final word when dealing with prohibited, noxious, and nuisance weeds. So make sure you read it repeatedly and understand it well. If you do need clarification, make sure you contact your plant health officer. We've read this thing more than we care to admit, and most of us we try to understand it pretty good. So we're here for you. We're here to help you. So just make sure you understand this, because this is the guide when it comes to being a weed inspector. So just a note on the bleach solution, you want to make sure that it's a 2% hyperchlorite solution. So here's just a quick reference. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but it will be here in the webinar for when you need to mix up a solution. You want to have it in a spray bottle, and some people do carry a boot wash with them. They make it out of a Rubbermaid tub and just have their boots swishing around in there. You want to make sure that you refresh your solution often. It degrades quickly in sunlight and whenever it gets exposed to organic matter like dirt, so it doesn't last very long. Here's just some pictures of a field kit, just a biosecurity kit. There's just bleach, your spray bottle, your boots. You can carry a first aid kit. That's always a good idea. Nitrile gloves, paper towel, all that kind of stuff. Clark had mentioned in his last webinar that having a plant press is really a good idea. So this is the example of the one that he was describing. You can make this, you know, give yourself an hour in the shop and make one of these if you need to, or you can order these type. The ones below it here are these are the ones used by the staff at the herbarium at the U of S. So they're handy and lightweight to carry around. The plywood ones can be quite heavy, so, and they take up a lot of room. Here's just an example of the Rubbermaid tub that I like to use. They're sturdy. They're easy to move around, easy to wipe off if you need them to. Here's a few good examples of Weed ID reference materials. They're handy to have with you in your vehicle. They are also going to be mentioned in our upcoming April webinar we're going to do on Weed ID. So if you're interested in that, it might be helpful to get a hold of a few of these books beforehand, just so you can kind of browse them first and get acquainted with the material. This first one, Weeds of Canada, is probably my favorite one. It's easy to follow. It's got really good pictures, and it's the species are all very applicable to our area. The next one down is also really good. It's a little bit more broad, just because it's for all of North America, but there are still some really good pictures and good information. There's a few more. A lot of people have this Weeds of the Prairies book. It's a good one as well. The Invasive Plant Species Identification Guide is available through the Saskatchewan Forage Council. I believe it's free of charge, but you need to pay shipping. So feel free to look into that. Here's a digital version as well. This is a nice little pocket guide. It's quite small. It's easy to carry around with you. It doesn't take up a lot of room, and it's a good guide. Pretty standard that a lot of people use. So a few more references. The plant health officers and I all kind of like this Sask Wildflower website. It's all Saskatchewan plants. I really like it because it's native plants as well as weeds. So sometimes when you're trying to identify something, it's not always known as a weed. It's often a native plant. So it's good to be able to identify those as well. While it's necessary to be able to identify weeds through resources and books and materials, something that is irreplaceable is having a good network of contacts. So rely on your PHO. We're going to help you as much as we can. Get to know an experienced weed inspector if you are new to the game. These people have been around a lot, and they've gotten some good resources of their own too. So really good to know the experienced ones. And just remember that weed inspectors can send plant samples into the Sask Crop Protection Lab free of charge. And that is it for my presentation. We're going to be having our next webinar on March 11th, and we're going to go over common issues and frequently asked questions of weed inspectors. So we're going to have Clark Brenzel and Rennie Grills talking on that webinar, and they're going to go over just common things that weed inspectors have to deal with and how to deal with them. So with that, I don't know if we have any questions, but I guess we can just wait a minute. And Clark, if you have anything you wanted to add, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that first book that you showed, that's Weeds of Canada in the Northern United States, that's out of print now. Oh. So it's no longer available, and it's been replaced by that black book, The Weeds of North America.
Okay.
It has the yellow flower on the front of it. So, and both of those books are by the same authors.
Yep.
So they're that Weeds of North America is the newer version.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Tammy, yes, there will be a recording of the presentation, and it'll get posted on the SARM website. John asked if there was any info for DIY plant press, and just wondering if that that press that Katie showed
Mm-hmm.
kind of meets the need, and it's super straightforward to make. All you need is 4 carriage bolts with wing nuts on them and fairly stout plywood. You want probably 5/8 or better plywood that will handle the pressure that you're going to apply to it. And then on the inside, you want some of the double ply cardboard on top and bottom. And then you also want some absorptive material in the center where you're putting the plants. And that absorptive material, one thing that is really good is like they have art paper at some of the art supply stores that will, you want the non-acid type preferably. And because acids can impart different colors to the tissues. So you might want to look into that a little bit. But the press itself is pretty straightforward to make. And we've got one at our crop protection lab, and it seems to work very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine was mentioning that the weeds of Canada and the northern United States may be available on eBay. There may be used copies around now. The nice part about that book is that it is fairly regional specific, so you don't have a whole lot of oddball things that would be more related to the southern US that wouldn't have any relevance here at all. By and large, that larger book, Weeds of North America, has most of the same elements as Weeds of Canada and the northern United States. There are a couple of species that I think are missing that would be in that first book, but I don't know that that's like super important. I think for ease of use in the field, that little pocket book that was on the next page there, Katie,
Mm-hmm.
that Invasive Plant Species Identification Guide. There is that was produced by the Invasive Species Council of Saskatchewan, and then made available through the Sask Forage office. And I believe that there's an initiative going on to update that right now and then do another reprint, if I remember correctly. And Elaine may have more background on that too. I'm not entirely sure. Just because of her connection to Shauna Lehman, who's on the Invasive Species Council. So that's kind of the questions that are up there right now.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a way to, oh, this one's probably for Joanne. Is there a way to see the map of weeds people have recorded in an area through the app?
No, so you need to log on to the website in order to see the map. The app is purely just for uploading your observations.
And that's it for questions. I don't see any new ones coming in, so.
Okay, well, I guess then we can call it a wrap for today. Thank you so much for attending, everyone, and we will see you on March 11th with our next webinar. Stay warm out there.